Hi everyone, my name is Penelope. Today I dressed up a little nicer than usual. It's for the video. I'm 29 years old, and despite what most people expect when they hear I co-founded a successful consulting firm, I don't wear designer heels or carry a purse that could pay someone's rent. I dress for comfort, not approval. Jeans, soft cardigans, flats I can walk miles in. Some people might call it plain. I call it practical. And honestly, I've always felt like if you have to show people you have money, you probably don't have that much of it. My husband, Ethan, and I met during our second year at Wharton. We were both type A, driven, sharp-tongued when we needed to be, but soft enough to share stress snacks at midnight in the library. We started as rivals in the same consulting internship. Then somehow, between late-night strategy decks and mock pitches, we fell into something real. We launched our firm 3 years ago, and it's grown faster than either of us expected. Clients from Fortune 500 companies fly in to see us. We've hired over 20 people and still count our team like family. But this story isn't about our business, or our marriage, or even the long, exhausting climb that brought us to where we are. It's about one random Wednesday, a perfectly average afternoon that somehow managed to dig into something I didn't even realize still stung. Ethan and I had flown into the city to visit my parents, New York, where I was born and raised. My parents still live in the same apartment in Queens, still argue over how much salt goes in the soup, still insist I'm too skinny and never eat enough. We'd had lunch together at their favorite little Lebanese spot. The weather was that kind of crisp you only get in early fall, when the air smells faintly of roasted nuts and the sky looks like someone turned the contrast way up. After lunch, Ethan went back to the hotel to take a call with a client in Singapore, and I decided to walk. I wandered into one of those luxury-lined streets near the Upper East Side, marble storefronts, doormen, and the kind of hush that costs more than it should. I wasn't really planning to shop. I just like looking. I passed a few boutiques before spotting a jewelry store I didn't recognize. Nothing massive, but elegant. The kind of place with soft lighting and velvet-lined cases. I don't wear much jewelry, but I'm a sucker for craftsmanship, for tiny details done well. So I walked in. The bell on the door jingled softly, and the scent of something floral and cold hung in the air. There were only 2 other people inside, one employee behind the counter, and a woman in heels and a camel coat examining a tray of diamond bracelets. The employee glanced at me, then looked back down at the display like she hadn't seen anything worth her time. I stepped closer to a nearby case, admiring the detail on a pair of vintage-style earrings. I had just leaned in to get a better look when I heard the woman speak. "Oh," she said loudly with a smirk in her voice, "I didn't realize they let tourists browse here now." The salesperson chuckled. "We've had a lot of window shoppers lately." It took me a second to realize they were talking about me. I stood up straight and met the woman's gaze. She didn't look away. She smiled like she was doing me a favor by acknowledging me at all. "I'm just looking," I said simply. The employee finally turned toward me, her face a perfect blend of forced politeness and mild irritation. "If there's something specific you're interested in, we could check the price range for you." There was nothing overtly rude in her tone, but it was the kind of thing you learn to hear if you've ever been underestimated, talked down to, or quietly dismissed, and I've heard it more times than I can count. I was in sneakers and a soft jacket, no makeup, hair in a low bun. I looked like someone on her way to a bookstore or a coffee shop, not someone who could afford the kind of jewelry they sold. And in that moment, I felt it. The sting. Not because I needed their approval, not because I cared about their opinion, but because I remembered being 15 and walking through this exact neighborhood with my mom, peeking into stores we couldn't afford, feeling like we didn't belong. And now, all these years later, after everything I've built, after every contract and client and long night that got me to where I am, here I was, being dismissed like some broke girl wandering in off the street. I didn't say anything else. I gave them a tight-lipped smile, nodded, and left. But that wasn't the end of it, not even close. I stepped back out onto the sidewalk, the bell jingling behind me as the door swung closed, sealing me off from their smug little bubble. The air outside felt colder than before, or maybe it was just my pride smarting. I didn't cry. I wasn't even angry, yet. I just walked, one foot in front of the other, until I found a bench a block down and sat there for a moment, letting the buzz of the city wrap around me. I've never been someone who cares much about appearances. Ethan jokes that I'm the only executive he knows who shows up to boardrooms in sneakers. But what I do care about, deeply, is respect. The kind that's earned, not assumed. And the way those two women looked at me, spoke to me, was a slap. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because I knew what they saw and how wrong they were. So I made a call. It was quick, casual, just a quick chat with Olivia, one of our firm's clients. She's a real estate investor with a penchant for old New York properties and expensive taste. We helped her rebrand her entire property group last year, and she's always looking for new gems to acquire, especially if there's a high-end lease involved. I asked her if she'd ever heard of a jewelry boutique on 82nd, gave her the name, and she paused, said she thought they were behind on their lease, that the landlord was considering not renewing it due to reputation issues. I could practically hear her ears perk up. "You thinking about buying them out?" she asked, half joking. "Not me," I said with a smile, "but I think you'd be doing the neighborhood a favor if you looked into it." She laughed. "I'll have my team reach out." That was all it took. I didn't tell Ethan right away. He was still on calls, knee-deep in some financial model, and honestly, I wasn't even sure I wanted to make it a thing. I didn't want to seem petty. But then again, was it petty to hold people accountable for the way they treat others? Especially when they made the mistake of doing it to someone who actually had influence? A week later, I got an update from Olivia. Her team had met with the landlord and confirmed that the boutique had several complaints filed against them: discriminatory behavior, unprofessional conduct, even a couple of documented incidents from mystery shoppers who felt uncomfortable in the store. And get this, the store's lease was indeed up for renewal within the next quarter. Olivia made an offer. Apparently, the boutique's owner was reluctant but flexible. A fancy way of saying they smelled money and didn't ask too many questions. She didn't plan to keep the current staff, said she'd be bringing in a new partner to help reimagine the space. Something more inclusive, elegant, customer first. The irony was delicious. 2 months later, I was back in the city for another visit. Ethan and I walked past the same street after dinner, and I saw the new signage going up. The jewelry store had closed quietly, no dramatic announcements, just a "we're closed for renovation" sign that had hung there for weeks before disappearing altogether. In its place, a new name, a modern font, and warm, inviting lighting that spilled gently onto the sidewalk. "You know," Ethan said, watching me watch the storefront, "you never told me what happened in there." I looked at him and shrugged. Didn't need to. Life took care of it. He raised an eyebrow, half smiling. "Was this one of your quiet storms?" I grinned. "Something like that. I never saw the woman in the camel coat again, but sometimes I wonder if she ever went back, expecting the same smug air and velvet trays, only to find the staff replaced and the tone entirely different. Maybe someone offered her a warm welcome, not knowing who she was, not knowing what she'd said to someone like me just months earlier. Or maybe she didn't notice anything at all. Because people like that rarely think they're the problem. But I noticed, and more than that, I remembered. Not because of the insult, but because of the lesson, that you never really know who someone is based on what they wear, or how they speak, or whether they walk into your store in sneakers or stilettos. You never know whose hand you're biting when you turn your nose up. And sometimes, you learn that the hard way. A few weeks after that visit, I got a handwritten note in the mail, not an email, not a typed letter. A real ink-on-paper folded note tucked into a thick cream envelope with the new boutique's branding embossed on the corner. It was from the new manager, a woman named Alina, whom Olivia had brought in from one of her other high-end shops in Chicago. I'd met her briefly during a strategy call a while back, young, sharp, endlessly professional. She thanked me, warmly but concisely, for the discreet recommendation, and said that after a full review of the former store's culture, client data, and public image, it became clear a total rebrand was not only appropriate, but necessary. Our goal, she wrote, is to create a space where elegance isn't about exclusion, but appreciation. I smiled reading that, not because I needed credit, but because I knew what she meant. A few days later, Olivia invited Ethan and me to the boutique's reopening. It was set to be a soft launch. Champagne, a few high-profile guests, live cello music, the works. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. Part of me was content just knowing what had happened. Quiet satisfaction is my favorite kind. But Ethan, ever the cheerleader, said, "Come on, you have to go. You earned this." So I went. I wore what I always wear. Comfortable black pants, a white linen blouse, my favorite soft leather flats. The only jewelry I had on was a pair of gold hoops and the simple platinum ring Ethan gave me when we got married. No glitter, no borrowed diamonds, nothing curated for show. I looked like myself, exactly as I wanted to. The boutique looked different too, warmer, less sterile, more inviting. The display cases were spaced further apart and soft music played overhead, no longer icy silence, but something welcoming. The staff wore warm smiles instead of judging eyes. You could feel it in the air. The space had shifted. I wandered past a tray of opal necklaces and found myself standing exactly where I'd stood that first day, near the spot where the woman in the camel coat had turned me into a punchline. Felt like a lifetime ago. Someone tapped my arm gently. I turned, expecting Olivia, but it was a staff member I didn't recognize, a young woman in her 20s with natural curls pulled back into a neat bun. She smiled genuinely. "Hi there, just let me know if anything catches your eye," she said kindly. "Thank you," I replied. "Just browsing." "No problem, you're welcome to try anything on," she added, then moved gracefully to assist another guest. No attitude, no assumptions, just simple courtesy. Ethan found me a minute later with 2 glasses of sparkling rosé. "Looks like a different place now," he said, handing me one. "It is a different place," I replied. Later that evening, Alina gave a brief speech thanking everyone for coming. She talked about what the new brand stood for: timelessness, artistry, approachability. Not once did she mention the previous owners or what had led to the change, but those of us who knew didn't need her to. That night, as we walked back to our hotel, Ethan looped his arm through mine. "You know," he said, "I was thinking about something." "What's that?" "You're the kind of person people never see coming," he said with a grin. I laughed. "You think so?" "I know so," he said. "You don't chase revenge. You don't yell. You just shift things, quietly. And suddenly, people find themselves replaced by something better." I looked up at the streetlight casting golden shadows across the sidewalk. "I don't want to replace people," I said softly. "I just want people to think twice before they treat someone like they don't matter. Because that's the heart of it, not payback, not pride. Just the hope that maybe the next time a woman in sneakers walks through that door, she won't be dismissed. She'll be welcomed. And no one will ever know that it started with a quiet girl in a soft cardigan who just happened to walk in at the wrong time and turned it into something right." The following week, I was back in our office. Glass walls, clean lines, soft whir of activity. We were mid-project with a new client, a tech startup out of Austin, and things were moving fast, just how I liked it. But even in the rush, my mind kept returning to that evening at the boutique, to the way something so small, so seemingly insignificant, a rude encounter, a dismissive glance, had unraveled into something so much bigger and so much better. It reminded me how easily people underestimate others. Not just me, people in general. It's not always about clothes or money. Sometimes it's about tone, accent, posture, the way you walk into a room. I've learned that people, especially those used to power, have a radar for what they think success looks like. If you don't match it, they file you away, dismiss, disregard. And it made me think about all the moments in my career where that same kind of judgment hovered just beneath the surface, Like when Ethan and I were pitching our firm in its early days, and a potential investor only spoke to him during the entire meeting, even though the deck was mine, the strategy was mine, and the execution plan, also mine. Or the time a male executive tried to explain back to me the proposal I had written, as if I needed help understanding my own ideas. But you learn, you adapt, and if you're lucky, or maybe just stubborn, you stop adapting to them and start shaping things for yourself. That boutique incident reminded me that I had spent so much of my life proving people wrong, and somewhere along the way, I stopped needing to. A few days later, I got a message from one of our junior consultants, Maya. She's 24, brilliant, a little shy, and still learning how to find her voice in boardrooms full of sharp suits and sharper egos. She asked if I had a few minutes to talk. When she stepped into my office, she looked nervous, clutching her notebook like a shield. "I wanted to ask you something," she began. "How do you handle it? When people don't take you seriously? Because I've been in meetings where I explain something clearly, and the client still turns to one of the guys like he's the one who really knows." I leaned back in my chair. God, I remembered that feeling. That quiet erosion of confidence, that internal voice that starts to whisper, "Maybe you really don't belong here." I told her the truth. "I used to take it personally," I said. "I'd go home and replay everything I said, trying to figure out if I came across too soft, too uncertain. Then I realized, it's not about you. It's about them, their bias, their ego, their limited view of the world." She looked at me, listening closely. "The trick," I continued, "is not to try to convince them you're smart. Just be smart. Consistently, unapologetically. Eventually, they'll either catch up or get left behind." Maya smiled then, the tension in her shoulders loosening a bit. "Thanks," she said quietly. "That helps." After she left, I sat for a while thinking about how many women, how many people, walk through life second-guessing themselves because someone else decided they didn't fit the mold. And I thought again about that woman in the camel coat. How sure she had been that I was beneath her, how she'd laughed, dismissed. And now, she might never know what happened, might never connect the dots between her cruelty and the slow, quiet closing of her favorite little boutique. But I didn't need her to know, because it wasn't about her anymore. It was about what came next, about what filled the space after the silence, about how we reshaped the world, not with shouts, but with steady hands. One Friday evening, I got another note, this time from Alina. It said simply, "We had our best opening month to date, and more than that, we've had people say, 'It just feels different in here now.' Thought you'd like to know." I did like knowing. I liked it very much. That weekend, Ethan and I sat on our balcony, wine glasses in hand, watching the city hum below us. The lights stretched for miles, blinking and flickering like a living thing. "You ever think about how far we've come?" he asked, swirling his glass lazily. "All the time," I said. "Do you ever miss the old days, when we were just broke and scrappy and trying to convince people to take us seriously?" I smiled. "I miss who we were, not how we were treated." He nodded. "Fair." We sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that's full and comfortable, the kind that says everything without needing to speak. And then I said, almost to myself, "I think the best part is knowing I didn't have to raise my voice to change the ending." Ethan looked at me amused. "You're talking about the store again, aren't you?" I grinned. "Maybe." He clinked his glass against mine. "To quiet victories. To the ones no one sees coming," I added, "because those are the ones I live for, the ones that aren't flashy, that don't need applause, that don't go viral or make headlines, but they matter. They build something, shift something, leave behind something better than what was there before, and if I have anything to say about it, I'll keep doing just that. One small, steady step at a time." About a month later, I got an unexpected email from Olivia. She was forwarding a message that had been sent to the new boutique's general inbox. Someone had written in asking if the former staff had moved to a different location, particularly one of the associates. The tone was polite, but there was an unmistakable edge of entitlement in the phrasing. The name on the email, Danielle Carrington. I stared at it for a moment. It was her. The woman in the camel coat. There was something surreal about it, seeing her name in my inbox after all that time, as if life had quietly nudged her back into my line of sight just to remind me that some lessons take longer to land. She had clearly returned, likely expecting to be greeted by the same faces, the same sense of superiority. Maybe she'd even hoped to be recognized. Instead, the boutique had been transformed into something she didn't control. Olivia had attached a little note with the foreword. "Not sure if this means anything to you, but I thought you'd appreciate the poetry of it." I did. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say, but I closed my laptop that night with a small smile. One of those private, quiet ones that stays with you long after it fades from your lips. A few weeks after that, I visited the boutique again. This time, not as a guest at a launch or an observer walking off a lunch. I went as a client. I was looking for a birthday gift for one of our senior consultants, a woman who had been with us since the very beginning, someone who had weathered storms beside me and always carried herself with kindness, no matter the room. I walked in, and a different young woman greeted me. She offered me water, asked thoughtful questions, and brought out pieces that genuinely matched the story I told her about the gift recipient. There was no pressure, no pretense, just grace. I ended up buying a delicate bracelet, a thin gold band with a small, perfectly centered sapphire, elegant and understated, a lot like the woman I was gifting it to. As I left, receipt in hand, the staff member said, "Thank you for coming in. We really appreciate customers like you." It was such a simple thing, but it made my chest tighten a little. Not because I needed the validation, but because I remembered what it felt like not to get it. And now, I was here. Full circle. Treated not just like someone who could spend, but someone who mattered. I walked back down the street that afternoon with the sun on my face, the sounds of the city humming gently around me, and I realized something I hadn't said out loud until then. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her, not at them. Not even at the world for being the kind of place where people like me had to prove ourselves over and over, because I knew who I was, and no one could take that from me. Not with a sneer, not with a raised eyebrow, not with a laugh tossed like a stone in a velvet room. They tried to make me small, but I had quietly, steadily grown bigger than their imagination. And that, I've found, is the most lasting kind of power. Not the kind you wear on your wrist or carry in your bag, but the kind that walks in soft shoes, holds her head high, and changes rooms without raising her voice. That's who I am now, and maybe who I've always been.